Okay, so welcome to this week's call. My name is Jackie Boyle and I live in sunny Australia today. And this week's talk today with Dr. Joseph Ahrens on Health Talk 365 is on, I think, quite a raw topic for many of us, which is depression and anxiety. And if you have not been affected by it yourself, you may know somebody that has. And, you know, the great thing about this particular topic is the awareness that now is being created, that people are more accepting of both of these conditions, whereas previously in the past it was, it may not have been the case. So we are lucky enough to have Dr. Ahrens on to explain what these conditions are and then what the alternative may be to support and assist our body with flavonoids. So I'm very excited. The other thing I want to point out to people, if you are recording this, we are not making any claims to cure, heal, and or mitigate anything here. We are just merely sharing an opinion and how we may be able to look at supporting the body. So how are you, Dr. Ahrens?
I'm just great. As you can see, I'm here back in the Bahamas, and I hope I can spread some of that cheer to the rest of the world. This is a great place to live.
Yes, you are very fortunate, that's for sure. So, Dr. Ahrens, when we talk about depression and anxiety, do you want to lead us through and educate us on, I know there are some similarities, but if you can guide us through and educate us in regards to what is depression, what is anxiety, what are the similarities, and how can flavonoids support and assist the body in both of these conditions, please?
Well, thank you very much, Jackie. You know, depression and anxiety, depression has really impacted me. Actually, I had a partner that was diagnosed with manic depression disorder. I actually thought he was just a depressed maniac, but nevertheless, we studied this quite a bit back in probably, it's been like 20 years ago, because we noticed some interaction between our products, flavonoids, and depression, anxiety. And so let me just back up there and talk about the definitions of that. And what I really want to talk about is definitions that mean something to people that have these disorders. You know, we try to put things in a box and define them. And that's one of the difficulties, because you find yourself in a box or out of a box, and okay, where does that leave me? I want to talk about the overall general concept of what's going on here. Anxiety and depression. You know, you could have anxiety and it does all these chemical things to you, and it's the cause of other chemical things. And then the biochemical route that happens in your brain is similar to the ones that are in depression. I mean, but it's different symptoms. Anxiety, you could say, first of all, you're worried about something. That's it. That's the very basis. You're worried about something, and then it just builds in your mind and you go down a dark rabbit hole. Depression doesn't necessarily mean you're worried about something, but you're sad about everything. The biochemically, though, these two pathways are very similar. I don't want to get into the real distinct differences between depression and anxiety, because I think they are the same thing. They're the same thing. Ultimately, every psychologist believes that they're in the same biochemical pathway. Do you remember when we have talked about the inflammatory pathway and how flavonoids interact with that? If you are genetically predisposed to having a condition or another, and you have your inflammation system, your immune system is out of control, you will express different symptoms. It's actually like a fingerprint. if you don't have the correct biochemistry, when you get into an inflammatory situation, bee sting, poison, refined sugars, that leads into inflammation, and then your body does a cascade after that, a cascade of biochemical reactions, and it might result in things like, for one person, asthma, for another person, arthritis, for another person, psoriasis. We have a type of fingerprint. Our inflammatory cascade is a fingerprint for each one of us. So this is why I talk often, well, you need flavonoids, but for different people, your response to not having enough flavonoids is different. I mean, I really want to emphasize that. It's all the same. Some people, if they don't have the correct diet, really that's what we're talking about, they don't have the correct diet, they will express a different symptom because of this inflammatory cascade. And you, Jackie, might have arthritis, and some other person might end up with psoriasis. It's all the same root cause. So that is a lot about how depression and anxiety exist here, because psychiatrists and psychologists are trying to define these disorders. I like to call it a disorder. I don't like to call it a disease. They're trying to put them in a box so they know how to treat them. But ultimately, this is what we're talking about, is each individual might have a different fingerprint about how they, when they don't have the proper diet and exercise. Okay. And then one person might become depressive, another person might have anxiety. And that's actually why when you say, okay, there are different symptoms, but ultimately the root cause is the same, as you have pointed out in these preliminary publications here about they share some similarities. And that's what I want to talk about. You know, depression is really serious. I like to joke about it, you know, depressed maniac versus manic depressive disorder, but it is deadly serious. My wife's family had depressive disorder, and it's obviously genetically caused. It was like the great-grandmother, the grandmother, the father, and then a couple of his daughters, they had clinical depression. I mean, it was just horrible, Jackie. It was as horrible as you could imagine. And then we have also, in that same line of people, they didn't have depression, but they had anxiety. And this just, so people joke, oh, what is anxiety? You know what? Unless you've had that as a clinical definition of anxiety, you don't know how that can cripple you. Anxiety about fear, a fear of going forward. So in one, depression is like, you know, a general sadness, like I just can't take the world anymore. And then we have anxiety, was a fear of I can't go forward. They have the same biochemical underpinnings. Just like I told you earlier that in inflammatory response, each one of us are different. We have a fingerprint. Well, we also have this mental type of fingerprint. So it's a complicated subject, and I don't want to lose anyone. So let us start back to brain biochemistry. Your brain is unbelievably remarkable. There's no computer that has been made that can approach you. Yes, there are computers that approach our computing power. Yes, we've done that. But actually, the brain itself is so remarkable. You're just left, if you get into the literature, you're just left with gasping for air. So let's talk about that a little bit. Your brain is always trying to do the best for you. Okay, of course it is. And when it comes across stimuli, whatever that was, you know, your eyes, your ears, or a pinprick, any type of stimulus, it has several options. This is very recent research, 2020. It has three options. It can send that signal to a multitude pathway. So you have a signal, it goes down your dendrite, the nerve, and then it branches off into 2, and then it goes further to the next branch. It goes into 4, and then keeps going on to, okay, 8, and then 16, and then 32, and then 64. Okay, that's as far as my math goes. But it multiplies that signal. That's one option. Number 2 option is that it's a one-on-one. It goes from one signal to the next dendrite, the next nerve, and it goes to the next nerve, and it goes, that's a one-on-one. Straightforward linear pathway. The third option is it doesn't quite do the job exactly. It sends out the signal, but it's only picked up by 1 or 2 dendrites. And then so you got like a 50% response. You get the signal and it goes on. It's the next nerve, it's only 50% transmitted, and the next nerve, it's only 25% transmitted, the next nerve, only 12.5, etc. So we have these 3 options that have been mapped out very recently in 2020. 1, 2, 3. Number 1, you have an explosion of signals. Number 2, linear signal. Number 3, degraded signal. All these types of signals are necessary for your brain to function. Okay, let's go back to the number 1, where we have the multiple branches. This causes your brain to look at every opportunity, if you will. You know, it's an explosion of signal, and it's looking at several different opportunities, and it starts building new nerve connections in your brain. It's like a new territory. It's expanding outward. Number 2 is just a straight highway. You're here at A, you end up at B. And number 3, C, is it kind of signal doesn't quite get there. Your brain needs all 3 of these signals. And then they balance each other in your brain. So we got the wild one, number 1, who's exploding with the signals, and then we have number 2 that's kind of solid. Okay, this is straightforward, and number 3, it doesn't quite get there. So why is this necessary for your brain to work? Well, we are, even now in 2022, our brains are constantly evolving. They're looking for new avenues. They're looking for new nerve transmitters, because it's constantly re-examining new information and then feeding back to itself. Okay, how'd that work out? You know, it's like a fire alarm going off. You know, the fire's going on, and all the firemen run out and they run around and put the fire out. And then after a while, your brain says, okay, how'd that work out? Well, if you put the fire out, that worked great. If there was no fire, you know, you just wasted a lot of resources. So your brain is constantly analyzing that. Then you got the middle channel, which is a tried and true, so to speak. A, B, C. Kind of boring. But you know what? Your brain hasn't learned anything. By going on that normal, straightforward, we think, okay, that's what you should do, A, B, C. Your brain hasn't learned anything. It's not prepared for the next experience. This is the solid, boring experience. And your brain doesn't want to do that. Your brain is wired, actually, theoretically, to always look for new experiences, because we're constantly evolving here. And then you've got the I would say the number 3 route, the backup, which the signal kind of peters out. It's kind of like the last effort. You know, if number 1, the explosion doesn't work, and the number 2, where, okay, this is straightforward, it works. Number 3 is, okay, it's kind of a diminishing effort. But, you know, in several circumstances, that third one is needed, because when number 1 and number 2 don't give any new results, well, at least the third one is petering out, but there's a kind of a result your brain can depend on. So I don't know if I've made myself clear on that. We have determined recently in 2020 that there are these 3 routes on any type of stimulus to your brain. One that sends out an excessive amount of signals that multiply over and over and over. It ends up with a tremendous amount of excitability and lots of brain synapses. That's where the signal from one nerve hits to the next one. They multiply themselves. And then you've got the second one, which is just very linear, very dependable, but you don't learn anything. And then you've got the third one that's kind of weak, but it's a backup. It works regardless of anything else. What in the world does that have to do with what I'm talking about? Because depression and anxiety are a result of mostly the number 1 pathway. Your brain, which controls your body, is trying to survive. And that number 1 is looking for every opportunity, new opportunities, new ways to make new nerve connections, put old memories in with new memories. And it's not very stable. And as we are living day to day, our brain is not stable. It is always on the edge of this chaos. That's how we live. Our brain is always on the edge of chaos because it always has to consider new things that are coming along. And so that number 1 is always looking for new opportunity, new signals. What does this mean? Whether it's a fright that we had, boy, you get a fright, your brain goes haywire. We've wired the brains, and it's running on this number 1 pathway. Everything is activated. And then number 2 is like the boring, straightforward. The number 3 is the circuit that, well, okay, it may work or not, but at least we can depend on it. People that have depression and anxiety have that number 1 option in abounds. That's the problem. If you have anxiety or depression, many other disorders like that, you have, through your genetic potential, inherited more number 1 than number 1, 2, or 3. It's not your fault. Depression is actually part of the pattern of your brain trying to survive. So it's a scatter across the spectrum, all these firings, and you fire elation. You also, at the same time, fire depression and anxiety, because it's not trying to be logical. It's looking at every possibility. Some of us have inherited the propensity to take lane 1 rather than lane 2 or lane 3. Now, there are also people that inherit more lane 2 than lane 1 and number 3. Okay, they're probably boring people. I know plenty of them. But that's the fact. That is the fact. And you look at people that are geniuses, from what we have been able to determine, they have inherited this more number 1 than 2 or 3. And with that comes brilliance. It also comes with depression and anxiety, because you inherit the whole scope there. Number 2, you're not going to be Christopher Columbus and sail across the Atlantic. I mean, you're just going to be on the tried and true and your brain just doesn't want to handle anything else. And number three, you're secure. You're not going to make any great discoveries. That I'm just being very frank here. We have determined there are these three pathways in your brain. Number one, it's explosive neurological energy. It looks from everything from exhilaration all the way down to anxiety and depression. And number two is just straightforward. And number three is, okay, I'm here, but I'm not very powerful. As a species, we need these. We need all three of these. We would never have made any discoveries without number one. And I know every single one of you can look at people that are, geniuses. They're so smart, but then they come with these other characteristics that are in that broad spectrum. Now, I don't want to start distinguishing between depression and anxiety, because there are just two of these hundreds of descriptions in that broad explosion. And it is unfortunate that certain individuals inherit things like depression and anxiety. It's not their fault. But what can we do to help us overcome that? So I want to plant the picture that our brain is living on the edge of chaos. I mean, do you get that concept? Our brain has this medium thing here, solid, but actually to be humans and to even go to the moon, we need that number one. Unfortunately, it also comes with the negative part, things such as schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. It's part of being human. We need that number one. But our brain is sitting here on the edge of chaos. That's actually a new concept developed, as I said, in 2020 by the American Psychiatry Association, probably identical in Australia or Europe, that there is a theory of this: your brain is sitting on the edge of chaos. We need that imbalance, almost falling over the edge, for us to be able to make new neurons. And what that means to us in our life is new explorations. Even people that learn languages readily, we've determined they have more number one than they do number two. People that just pick up languages immediately. I mean, I've struggled to know just a couple of languages. There's some people that can do 10, 12 without any issue whatsoever. Their brain is more wired to the number one. Their brain makes new neuronal connections more readily than the number two and the number three. Okay, so I hope I've established that. My brain is living on the edge of disaster, but that's what makes it exciting. Unfortunately, for some people, they fall into more of the depression side. And you know what? There's so many geniuses that are making tremendous discoveries, but they all also have the depression. It's like you can't get away from the some ad. Even actors, they're very artistic. They also always seem to have some depression with them. You just can't get away from that zero sum unit.
So Dr. Ahrens,
all right,
I want to keep you moving forward so we can stay on time, because it's something that you have spoken about. But what I'm gathering from this, so that I'm not a genius like you, I'm not, and I don't say that lightly. I say it with the utmost respect. But my take from this so far is that it's like a highway of signals with no stoplight. When we're in this number one, this explosion of signals, if you have suffered with depression, that there just is no stoplight. It just keeps going, and it's like a highway that you're driving down in the USA, and it's a 12-lane deep, and you just think, my goodness. And then we've got things like fog, and we've got, where your brain feels dull and you just don't have the energy to do anything. And then we have anxiety, where we have fear, and it's fight or flight. So there's all of these things that are symptoms thereof. But well, I know you're heading in this direction, but I want to sort of gently push you in this direction. In how can we address this with the support of flavonoids, and what can that do for us?
Well, I am a guy who's keyed into enzymes and flavonoids. And, you know, the old saying is that if you're a carpenter and you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But in this instance, it's absolutely true. Flavonoids help that situation by keeping your brain from just exploding into that number one avenue. We have a paper. We need to put that on the website or this coming week. There's a very recent paper in 2021 that showed that flavonoids keep your brain from just taking off on number one. Flavonoids are like a buffer to keep you from taking off onto number one. They're regulatory. It gets back to the blood, the brain gut highway. The brain or the gut, brain or gut, whichever way you're talking about, either brain to gut or gut to brain axis. If you have a proper diet, I mean, it sounds so simple, and I don't even like to say this so often because it just sounds so simple. If you have the proper diet, your gut is sending the signals to that brain, which I just told you is on the edge of chaos all the time, because that's how we're made. Our brain is sitting on this knife edge of which way should I go, because it's trying to survive. Those flavonoids help your gut bacteria send signals to your brain to keep it balanced. That's the point right there. Without the flavonoids, your brain can just take off into pathway one. And if you're predisposed, you'll have depression, anxiety, and so many other disorders that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. Your brain is sitting on the edge of chaos, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. We're not just mechanical machines here in our brain. We're not just computers. That chaos is necessary for us to adapt to new things. Nevertheless, it's a balance. And those flavonoids, which are the preferred food for the gut bacteria, cause your gut bacteria to send positive chemical signals to your brain to tell you you're on the right track. You're balanced. Even though you have this brain chaos, you're balanced, everything is okay. When you don't have these flavonoids, your brain, depending on your genetic propensity, I'm saying that many times, doesn't happen to everyone. Let me give you just step back a moment. It's just like smoking cigarettes. Everyone that smokes cigarettes does not get cancer. That's a fact. But it's highly likely that if you do smoke cigarettes, you're going to get cancer. It's like right now, we think about 50-50. If you smoke cigarettes, 50% of the chance you're going to either die from like a lung cancer or throat cancer or mouth cancer or a heart attack. But the 50%, nothing will happen to you. But there is a genetic propensity to that. Getting back to the depression and anxiety, if you have a propensity to have depression or anxiety, if you have the proper diet and flavonoids, your gut bacteria will send signals to your brain that will tell you everything's okay, and you won't fall into that trap. Am I clear on that? Did you understand that?
I understood that very clearly, because understanding from what you've told us in the past before that these flavonoids actually do cross that blood-brain barrier. So it's very clear to me. Well,
it's, it ends up sounding like I'm saying, okay, flavonoids are the cure for everything. I'm not trying to do that. But I'll tell you, if you get into the literature, your diet is everything. I'm telling you, whether you have a propensity for, okay, lung cancer or depression or anxiety, if you don't have the right diet, you're going to fall into that trap. This is why people that suffer from depression, clinical depression, I'm not talking about being sad over the weekend because you didn't go to the concert, or sad because your wife died. I'm talking about clinical depression where you just can't function, or anxiety where you can't function because you're so fearful of what the future brings. Those are genetic propensities. If you suffer from those, if you have a poor diet and poor flavonoids, those are going to be expressed much readily otherwise. Now, it's not going to eliminate them. Come on, it's not going to cure them. But if you don't have the proper diet, you're going to suffer from those symptoms much more often. This is why people that have clinical depression and have clinical anxiety, when they take flavonoids, they say, "Oh, I'm much better. No, we don't cure anything. It's your body. You get back to the point that your brain is on this edge of chaos." And I encourage everyone, just Google that, brain chaos theory. This is new in 2020. You're sitting here, you got these 1, 2, and 3 options, channels to go forward. One is total chaos. It opens up exploration. Number 2 is a solid, tried and true. And number 3 is, okay, I'm just the last resort kind of thing. You've got those 1, 2 options. If you have the proper diet, which includes flavonoids, which are the preferred food for your biota, the biome in your gut. Your gut will send the positive signals to your brain, and it will keep you from just jumping off into the abyss of chaos, which, if you're genetically predisposed, will be those depression and anxiety syndromes.
So, Dr. Ahrens, I've got a couple of questions. I want to intervene here. I'm sorry, so we can try and get them answered as well. Linda's just asked, so when we're talking about, psychotic medications and the level 1 being that we're looking at the explosive signals, is this where it makes them feel dull and that life becomes uninteresting for them?
Yes, I just get that. So most of our drugs are only handling the symptoms. That's what most drugs do, by the way. They just tackle the symptoms, not the underlying cause. Now, I can't change somebody's genes, of course. Can't do that. Well, we can somewhat, but I can't do that. But we're just handling the symptoms. It's just like, I got a toothache, so take aspirin and the pain goes away. What's the underlying cause of the pain? And that's what's happening with psychotic drugs. You just are handling the symptoms. You stop the brain from doing that explosion of going in that number 1 pathway. It slows it down. It doesn't actually stop it. It just slows it down. Well, I'm talking about preventing it from going to that pathway more than the number 1, 2, and 3. Have a proper diet, and it's absolutely flavonoids. You will not then trip off into the number 1 pathway.
So, Dr. Ahrens, to lead into another question that's here that will carry you on with what you're answering with the first one. So when people are diagnosed with clinical depression and or anxiety, and through brain mapping, or if no medications have seemingly worked and they're finding that their symptoms are worsening or they're just not getting the relief that they need, when we're talking about using flavonoids and providing the body to help it heal itself and to support it to strengthen the immune system, to open up those pathways, I guess, in a positive manner, what sort of doses would we be looking at? And I know this is how big is a piece, how long is a piece of string, but this is just one of the questions, like what would we be looking at as a reasonable dose for someone with clinical depression?
Well, I want to talk about a race car, first of all. I'll talk about this a lot. Who needs these flavonoids? Okay, you got a flat tire on a race car. You could talk about its aerodynamics. You could talk about its engine. You could talk about the fuel. But you know what? He's got a flat tire. You need to get the flat tire fixed before you can work on the motor and all the other things. And this is where these flavonoids come in. Everyone needs to have the proper amount of flavonoids before you can start talking about any other fixes. So make sure that everyone has enough flavonoids. And it's not just depression and anxiety, it's everything you can think about. It's broken bones, everything in your body. You need to have enough flavonoids, and that comes from the colored fruits and vegetables, the deep colors. That's what flavonoids means. Flavo in Latin means actually color. It doesn't mean flavor. So the colored parts, that's where the flavonoids are. But unfortunately, we don't get enough. So what is the dose? Everyone needs, I'd say a gram a day of flavonoids, a gram a day. And in our normal diets in this year, 2022, we just don't get enough flavonoids. Even if you take all these colored fruits and vegetables, you're only getting like a half a gram. So you need to supplement your body with additional flavonoids. I don't care where they come from. I particularly think I've got some pretty good formulas, but nevertheless, take flavonoids. I don't care where they come from, citrus flavonoids, or just go to Amazon or whatever and just order flavonoids. You need at least a gram of flavonoids every day. So, and you know what? You can't take too many flavonoids. You can take 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams a day. If it's too much, your body just eliminates them through your urinary system or through the sweat in your skin. Take a couple of grams of flavonoids every single day. You will find out if you do have a propensity for anxiety or depression, it will get much less. The symptoms will just completely drop. And we're going to talk in the future weeks about other things like autism. Your propensity to express those symptoms will greatly drop because flavonoids are primarily the food for the biome in your gut. They then send the proper signals to your brain, which is always on this edge of catastrophe, and will keep it balanced.
So, Dr. Ahrens, in the flavonoids that we, most of us on this call know, when we're talking about dose, this is one of the questions that's just come through. When we're talking about 1 gram, is that equivalent to 4 capsules a day?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Okay. And the other thing, when we talk about, again, like we're sitting in this space of whether it be depression or anxiety and the symptoms thereof, why is it when we look at one of the very first things that seems to be noted or is expressed or told to us by people that start on these flavonoids that may be suffering with many conditions, but predominantly with depression and or anxiety, that brain fog seems to be the first thing that lifts, like they feel as though that they've been sitting underneath the fog, they can't think clearly, they're just going through the motions, going through the steps, step after step. And this is something over the 6 years of working with you that so many people have come back and said, the first thing I've noticed is the brain fog. It's like somebody switched the light switch on. Why is that?
Well, flavonoids are primarily, 90% of them are the preferred food, the prebiotic to the probiotic, but 10% of them actually manage carbohydrate, sugar metabolism in your body. And you have a lot of refined sugars floating around in your body. These flavonoids actually help you. Flavonoids help you get that sugar where it should go and keep it out of the places that it should not go. And one of them is it helps you take glucose out of your bloodstream and pump it right into your brain and your muscles. That's the same glucose transporter 4. We call it GLUT4. Same one in your muscles that is in your brain. And your brain primarily uses glucose as a energy source. And so it takes glucose out of your bloodstream, pumps it into your brain, and you actually feel awake for one of the first times in your life. And why? Because you've not had enough flavonoids. So those are the two things. Well, there's a lot of them, but let's talk about the two primary ones. Number one, flavonoids help with carbohydrate metabolism. They take that sugar that you have eaten and get it into your brain. They keep it out of fat tissue. Number two, they regulate your inflammatory system, keep it under control. And then after that, most of them go to the gut biome. That is their preferred food source. And then they send the positive signals to your brain and keeps you very well balanced.
Dr. Ahrens, I want to really thank you on behalf of all of us that are on this call, and for those that listen to this afterwards as well, and for those that share it. What you've shared with us today has made it, I feel, very clear, and it's been another level of education to understand the importance of fueling our body with decent flavonoids, but also we are what we eat. We do have the best piece of real estate walking on this earth, and that is ourselves, and we need to nurture that and look after it. And this is just two conditions that are, amongst many that our bodies are confronted with at different times. So what you provided to us today is another book in the library of knowledge for us on our education. So I do want to thank you so much for everything that you've provided to us. Is there anything that you'd like to finish this call off with today?
Well, I always don't want to come across as, Dr. Flavonoid, and flavonoids are the solution to everything. But we really do understand in the diet, we really understand protein, we understand carbohydrate, and we understand fats. Then there's these micronutrients, and this is where that's where the flavonoids fall in, and we don't hardly know anything about them. What we are understanding is there's vitamins and minerals, and flavonoids should be classified as that vitamin group. They're vitamin-like. They are essential for you to function properly. We're just now understanding this, and I'm very thankful to my colleagues in the scientific world that they've just like I told you, 2022, 2020, we've come to find out that the brain is sitting on this edge of chaos. If I had told you that 5 years ago, you would have laughed at me. But no, this is real studies done on humans and mice and rodents. There is that flavonoids impact this system. We're just now understanding it. It gets back to, Jackie, you are what you eat, and flavonoids are an essential part of your diet. Unfortunately, we can't get enough. You need to supplement yourself.
Hear. I'm fully on board with that, as I know many of us are, Dr. Ahrens. So I want to thank you on behalf of all of us, and I do want to invite you to next week. Next week's call is sitting in the autistic spectrum, and we've got two amazing mothers that are going to join us. Dr. Ahrens is going to outline what the autistic spectrum potentially is and what we're looking at, but these two amazing mothers who are going to be gracious enough to share their story with their child, or their sons, as it may be. So please join us. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Ahrens. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope everybody around the world has a wonderful weekend as well. Stay safe, fuel your body with what you need. We are what we eat, and I hope that you have a great one, and we look forward to seeing you next week. So thank you.
Bye-bye.